So picture this. You've had like a highly productive day.
Oh, the best kind of day.
Right. You were kind to people, you handled pressure well, you showed up and basically just did your best.
Yeah, you're feeling good.
Exactly. You're feeling good. But then, one negative moment happens.
Just one.
Just one. Like maybe it's an awkward silence in a meeting or, a single critical comment from your boss or even just a minor mistake you made in an email.
The dreaded typo.
Yes. And suddenly, that one tiny, insignificant moment just completely dominates your entire evening.
It's all you can think about.
Right. You're laying in bed and your brain is just saying, hey, let's loop this one terrible moment forever.
Yeah, just on repeat.
So why do we do that? Why does our brain cherry pick the bad stuff?
Well, it's actually...
It's because it feels like a character flaw, right?
Yeah.
But the mission of our deep dive today is to explore this massive revelation, and that is, you are not pessimistic. You are just prehistoric.
I love that phrasing so much. Prehistoric.
Right. We are exploring the hidden evolutionary scripts that are basically driving all of our modern anxiety.
And it is so liberating to realize it's an evolutionary script.
It really is. So to do this, we're pulling from some incredible sources. We've got insights from the book The Art of Worrying, As Warrior, or As Worrier by Naresh J. Jain.
Fantastic book.
Truly. And we're pairing that with foundational psychological research from some of the leading minds, Rick Hansen, Daniel Kahneman, John Cacioppo, and Barbara Fredrickson.
Heavy hitters in the psychology world.
Oh, absolutely. So, okay, let's untack this.
Yeah, let's do it. And I think to set the stage here, we really need to validate what you just described about that evening loop.
Please do, because it feels awful.
Right, because when you feel overwhelmed by that single negative event, your first thought is usually, I'm broken, or, I have this doomed, anxious personality.
Totally. You just think you're weak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it isn't a sign of weakness at all. It is literally a built-in survival mechanism.
A survival mechanism.
Yeah. To understand it, you have to realize that the brain's negativity bias evolved because for our ancestors, survival mattered vastly more than comfort.
Okay, so we're talking about way back.
Way back, hunter-gatherer times, the brain was not designed to make you happy, Its whole job was just to keep you alive.
Make you breathing.
Exactly. So imagine one of our ancestors, they're walking through the savannah, right?
Mm.
And they hear a rustle in the bushes.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. So they have a choice. They can think, oh, it's probably just the wind, no big deal.
Which is the chill, optimistic approach.
Right, the optimistic approach. But if they're wrong, if it's not the wind but a predator, they die. They literally do not survive to pass on their genes.
Wow. So the cost of being chill is death.
Exactly. The cost of ignoring it is fatal. But if they assume the worst, if they assume it's a tiger, they panic, they get an adrenaline rush, and they run up a tree.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. Even if it was just the wind, they survive. They're stressed out, but they live. So evolution heavily favors the anxious brain.
That makes so much sense. There's this concept in the sources, right? The berry versus snake thing.
Yes, the berry versus snake paradigm.
Yeah.
It's such a great way to visualize this.
Yeah, so it's like if our ancestor finds a bush with these incredibly sweet berries.
A huge win for them. Calories.
Right, massive win. But if there's a snake sitting right next to that bush.
The berries don't matter anymore.
Exactly. The berry isn't the main story. The snake is the entire story.
And that is exactly why the brain became so excellent at detecting danger. It had to be.
It's storing the pain, remembering the threats.
Right. It prioritizes everything that could go wrong because in a dangerous physical environment, that is a flawless system. It's perfection.
But here's the crazy part, and this is what I want to really contrast with today. The modern world isn't full of predators hiding in the bushes.
Not literal ones, anyway.
Right. Our bushes today are full of deadlines and unread Slack messages.
Oh, the unread messages.
Financial stress, social comparison, just this constant performance pressure.
Unfinished tasks.
Yes. The fear of not being enough. That's our snake in the bush now.
Totally. And your brain reacts to that Slack message the exact same way it reacted to the tiger.
Which is wild. It feels like, okay, here's an analogy. It feels like having this state-of-the-art smoke alarm in your kitchen, right?
Okay, yeah.
But it goes off every single time you toast a bagel, not just when the house is on fire.
That is the perfect analogy.
It's so annoying. Why can't we just, turn it off when we know there's no actual fire, when we know the threat isn't lethal?
Well, what's fascinating here is that we are seeing the world through a lens that was ground by evolution,
Okay.
but it was ground for a world that no longer exists.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And worry never stopped to tell us, to update the prescription.
We desperately need a software update.
We really do. Because the brain now mistakes a text reply, like a slightly delayed text, for total social rejection.
And back then, rejection meant you get kicked out of the tribe and you die.
Exactly.
Mhm.
A delay feels like a disaster. A mistake at work feels like an attack on your identity. Uncertainty feels like actual physical danger.
It is so exhausting just thinking about it.
It is, because the alarm is loud, and you can't just easily unplug it.
Right. So let's look at the science of this, the Velcro brain. Because we know the evolutionary why now.
Right. Yeah, the survival aspect.
But moving to the neurological, how do the experts actually measure this?
Well, there's Rick Hansen, a psychologist at UC Berkeley. He has this brilliant way of describing it.
This is one of my favorite parts of the sources.
Oh, it's so good. He says the brain is like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones.
Velcro for bad, Teflon for good. Here is where it gets really interesting.
Doesn't just perfectly capture the feeling?
It completely does, because like the bad stuff just sticks instantly. It's got this little hook.
You have the Velcro hooks.
And the good stuff just slides right away. That's frictionless.
Yeah.
Like one insult from a random person can stain your memory for, what, years?
Years. You'll remember exactly what they were wearing.
Yes. The exact tone of their voice. But a genuine compliment from someone you actually love,
It vanishes by dinner.
poof, gone. One fear echoes all night long, but a huge success is just forgotten by the next morning.
Right. And then you have people like Daniel Kahneman.
The Nobel Prize winner, right?
Exactly. Author of Thinking Fast and Slow. He demonstrated this through behavior. He showed that losses loom larger than gains.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that actually look like?
So his research basically proves that the human mind reacts far more strongly to what it might lose than to what it might get.
Oh, like the coin flip thing.
Exactly, the coin flip. So if I say to you, let's flip a coin, tails, you lose $100. Heads, you win $100.
I am definitely not taking that bet.
Right. Most people won't. Because the pain of losing $100 feels way heavier than the joy of winning $100.
That is so irrational, but it feels so true.
It is irrational mathematically, but biologically it makes total sense.
Yeah.
We hate losing things.
And John Cacioppo, the neuroscientist, he actually found the physical proof for this, didn't he?
Yeah, he looked at how the brain processes information. He found that negative information inherently creates a much stronger electrical surge in the brain than positive information.
Wow. Literally a stronger electrical current.
Exactly. The brain is literally wired to light up more for the bad stuff.
So it's not just us being dramatic, it's hard science.
It is hard science.
Yeah.
And if we connect this data to emotional maturity, it's pretty profound.
How so?
Well, since science proves that our internal alarm is naturally going to be louder than the actual situation,
Right.
then emotional maturity begins the moment you stop believing every alarm just because it's loud.
Well, that's huge. Stop believing the alarm just because it's loud.
Exactly. You hear the alarm, you acknowledge it, but you don't necessarily act like the house is burning down.
Because it's probably just a toasted bagel.
Exactly.
Okay, but here is where worry gets really sneaky. It has this deceptive disguise.
Oh, it is the master of disguise.
It really is. Like how it tricks us into thinking it's actually useful. The sources talk about the trap of repetition.
Right. The 10-to-1 scenario.
Yes. So imagine 10 perfectly good things happen to you in a day.
Like what?
Like, you get through a really tough meeting, someone holds the elevator for you and smiles, you finally finish that spreadsheet.
You manage to stay calm in traffic.
Exactly. Progress. 10 solid wins. But then one bad thing happens.
One little criticism.
Yeah. Or a mistake, or just an uncomfortable moment. What does the brain do? It replays that one bad thing like 17 times that night.
Over and over and over.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Doesn't worry actually help us prepare?
The classic defense of worry.
Right. Like, isn't a little bit of anxiety necessary so we don't just completely drop the ball at work or, in life? If I don't worry, will I even pay my rent?
It's such a common assumption. But this is exactly how worry dresses itself up so beautifully.
Dresses up.
Yeah, it dresses like logic. It sounds like responsibility. It feels like preparedness. It sits there and says to you, see, I'm just being realistic. You need me.
And just keeping us safe.
Exactly. But in reality, it isn't solving the problem at all. Preparation is an action. You prepare, and then you're done.
Right.
Worry is just repeatedly reopening the wound. It's ruminating.
So replaying the awkward conversation 17 times isn't preparing me for tomorrow.
No, it's just making you suffer 17 times.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And the physical toll of that is insane.
It's exhausting.
It really is. Like if you've ever felt completely bone-weary exhausted after a day that was technically fine on paper.
Where you just sat at a desk all day?
Yes, this is why. Because your physical body was locked in this grueling battle with a mere thought.
Your cortisol is spiking, your muscles are tense, you're fighting a tiger in your mind while sitting in an ergonomic chair.
It's so wild. Okay, so we know the problem. Now we need to transition to the solution. And to do that, I want to introduce the architect of this resilience framework, Naresh J. Jain.
Yes. His background is so crucial to understanding why this works.
Because his background proves why these concepts are important in the actual real world, not just in a therapist's office. Right?
Exactly. He is not just theorizing about anxiety.
Right. He's a chartered accountant and this deeply seasoned governance, risk, and compliance professional.
With over 29 years of leadership experience.
That is a long time to be managing massive risks. And the industries he's worked in, infrastructure, oil and gas, financial services.
Media and broadcasting, sports, shipping. It's incredibly diverse.
Colossal industries. I mean, he served as the head of compliance and enforcement for workers' welfare and human capital for the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022.
Which is just staggering when you think about the scale.
Delivering 8 stadiums and all that infrastructure, the pressure must have been unbelievable.
Well, completely. He's also worked with ADCO, part of the AD&OC group in the UAE.
Right. Hapag-Lloyd, Tata Consultancy Services.
Star TV, which is now Geo Hotstar. These are massive, high-stakes environments.
And he's based between Mumbai and Doha, so he's got this global perspective. Plus, he's super involved in philanthropy, like the Lions Club International in Mumbai.
Yeah, he's a key committee member there. But here is the really fascinating duality of his background.
The holistic stuff.
Yes. Alongside all this corporate rigor, he is a certified life coach and a business coach.
And deeply interested in occult sciences, right? Numerology, Vastu, Feng Shui, astrology, palmistry.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
it makes total sense.
How so? Because at first glance, oil and gas compliance and astrology seem like total opposites.
They do. But think about what a governance and risk professional actually does. He understands pressure from the inside out.
Right.
He operates in these environments where precision and accountability are essential. The stakes are intensely real. Millions of dollars, people's safety.
So he can't just tell his team to think positive.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
But he also knows that human beings aren't just data points on a spreadsheet.
We are emotional systems.
Yes. We carry ambition, fear, memory, pride, disappointment, hope. We have a fundamental need to feel safe.
And Jane understands that dealing with our internal worry requires his exact, unique skill set.
He brings the discipline of a risk manager to understand the mechanics of the anxiety and the compassion of a life coach to actually heal it.
That is such a powerful combination, discipline and compassion.
It's exactly what's needed.
Okay, so having established Jane's credentials in risk management, let's look at the specific psychological tool he uses to manage our internal risk.
Yes, the science of joy.
The science of joy, which sounds a bit fluffy at first, but it really isn't. It's based on psychologist Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory.
A completely revolutionary theory in psychology.
So tell me about broaden and build. What does it actually mean?
Well, Fredrickson found that positive emotions don't just feel nice. They aren't just a byproduct of a good day. They actively widen our thinking.
They broaden it.
Exactly. When you feel fear, your brain gives you tunnel vision. You only see the threat.
Right, like looking through a straw.
Yeah. But when you feel joy or gratitude or amusement, your brain literally broadens its awareness. You see more options, you're more creative.
And then the build part.
Because your mind is open, you can build resilience over time. You build resources, relationships, and coping skills.
So what does this all mean for us? This is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is.
Because it means good feelings are not a luxury.
Not at all.
Joy is not frivolous, gratitude isn't weak, hope isn't denial. They are actual utilitarian tools used to retrain a prehistoric mind.
Yes. To become a warrior instead of a worrier, which is the core of Jane's book title, it doesn't mean you just deny fear.
Right, you're not pretending the tiger isn't there.
Exactly. It simply means you don't let fear drive the car. You use these tools, like joy and gratitude, to actively balance the evolutionary scales.
I love that. You're fighting back with joy.
Literally.
All right, this brings us to the climax of the deep dive, the 5-step protocol.
Yes, from worrier to warrior.
We're going to walk through Jane's highly actionable steps to reclaim your mind from this negativity bias.
And these are very practical.
So practical. Okay, step 1. Name the pattern.
Crucial first step.
The instruction is to say aloud, this is negativity bias. Why aloud?
Because when you label it, you interrupt the emotional spiral. You're using the logical part of your brain to name what the emotional part is doing.
So you're basically calling it out, I see you, prehistoric brain.
Exactly. You distance yourself from it.
Okay, step 2. Pause before believing the thought. The prompt here is to ask, is this true or just familiar?
Oh, that is such a powerful question.
It really hits hard because a lot of our worries are just familiar, right?
Totally. During that pause, you have to ask yourself some hard questions. Is this fact or is it fear?
Right.
Is this threat real or is it entirely imagined?
And I love this one. Is this moment dangerous or is it simply uncomfortable?
That distinction changes everything because an awkward meeting is uncomfortable. It is not dangerous.
Right. I'm not going to be eaten by my coworkers.
Exactly. You have to ask, am I in the present or am I living in an old warning system?
That is profound. Okay, step 3. Count the good on purpose.
Because the brain naturally skips the good, remember, Teflon.
Right, the good stuff just slides right off, so we have to actively hunt for it. You must actively notice it.
You have to force yourself to see the good things, otherwise they just don't register.
Which leads right into step 4, let one good thing matter.
This is where people struggle the most, I think.
Oh, completely. We are terrible at this. The rule is, don't brush off compliments, don't ignore progress, don't minimize a win.
Someone says, great presentation, and we immediately say, oh, but I messed up slide 4.
Yes, we literally bat the compliment away. We have to stop doing that.
Yeah.
We have to let the Velcro grab the good thing for once.
You have to hold on to it, savor it, let it actually sink in.
And finally, step 5, repeat safety.
Repetition is how the brain learns.
Right. If it can rehearse fear, it can rehearse peace.
Your brain is amazing at rehearsing fear. You've practiced it thousands of times.
I am a gold medalist in rehearsing fear.
Most of us are.
Oh.
But you have to consciously rehearse feeling safe over and over until that neural pathway becomes stronger than the fear pathway.
These aren't just like small acts of self-help. They are literal rewiring acts for your neurology. You are physically changing your brain.
You really are. It takes time, but it's mechanical. It works.
Okay, this has been an incredible journey. I want to bring this all together for you listening right now.
Yeah, let's synthesize this.
I want to remind you, you are not trapped in your first reaction. You are not doomed by your first thought.
No, you're not.
And you are certainly not defined by the worst moment of your day. Yes, your brain will absolutely jump to danger and whisper worry.
It's going to happen. It's biology.
It's biology. But you now know a secret. You can choose another response. You can breathe, you can soften, and you can let joy stay long enough to be remembered.
And that is the real art of worrying. It isn't about eliminating worry completely.
Because that's impossible.
Right. It's about transforming it, turning the worrier into a warrior, turning fear into awareness, pain into wisdom, and mere survival into true living.
True living.
When your mind says something is wrong, you can answer, maybe. But not everything is wrong. Not everything is unsafe. And not everything needs my fear.
Not everything needs my fear. Wow. Okay, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to explore on your own today.
I love this part.
If your brain's evolutionary default setting is solely designed to keep you alive, what is the conscious tool you are going to use today to actually live?
That's a beautiful question.
Having an old alarm system is fine because now you have a new awareness. And awareness can heal what fear has repeated. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.